Hello, I'm Rabbi Elton from the Great Synagogue in Sydney. Our personality today is Rabbenu Gershom, or Hagolah, Rabbi Gershom ben Yehuda, who was the leader of German Jewry in the early 11th century, born in 960 in Metz in France, but becomes a leading rabbinic figure in Mainz in Germany. Last week when we discussed Rav Saadia Gaon, we said that the centre of Jewish life, intellectual life in particular, moved from Babylonia after the death of Rav Saadia Gaon. But where did it move to? One place it moved to was Germany. Rav Gershom was educated in Northern Europe, and then when he moved to Mainz, he became a very important teacher of disciples, including those who went on to become the teachers of Rashi, perhaps the greatest figure of medieval Northern European Jewry. Rabbenu Gershom was the undisputed leader of the Jews of Northern Europe. That meant they no longer needed to look to Babylonia or places in the east for their religious guidance. They turned instead to Rabbenu Gershom. So he really established the independence of Northern European Jewry from Babylonia and even from Sephardic Jewry more widely. They now were reliant on their own scholars. And his scholarship was so intense and so enormous that his academy was considered superior to the ancient academies Surat and Pumbedita in Babylonia. So we have a real wresting of the centre of Jewish intellectual life and scholarship and religious leadership from the east, and it's brought far, far into the west. One of the most important legacies of Rabbenu Gershom was a series of takanot, of enactments which he and his colleagues put in place. It's been suggested that some of these in fact were a ratification or a codification of earlier policies, but at any rate they have been attached to the name of Rabbenu Gershom. The first was against polygamy. Previously, and we know biblically and in the Talmud, it is permitted for a man to marry more than one wife. Rabbenu Gershom prohibited polygamy. Second, he prohibited a woman being divorced against her will. Previously, you could simply give a woman a bill of divorce and she was thereby divorced from her husband. Rabbenu Gershom said a woman could not be divorced except according to her own consent. And thereby he made the practice of divorce much more egalitarian between men and women. And thirdly, he said one was not allowed to open a mail addressed to somebody else. He made the post private. Now, what was the reason for these three enactments? It's been suggested it has to do with increasing trade between Northern Europe and the East. That Jewish merchants from Germany would, let's say, go to a place in the East, North Africa or the Middle East, and there they would find a wife. They would leave behind their wife back in Germany and find a new wife. They would marry her in a state of polygamy and then send a letter back to Europe with a bill of divorce for their wife, who could either consent or not consent, but still the divorce would be active and would take place. In order to prevent those abuses, Rabbenu Gershom said you could not do that, and that restricted the ability of these men to abandon their wives and marry new wives in the East. In addition, as trade became more active and more frequent, it was important to protect the safety of letters travelling from one part of the world to the other, and that's why he made sure that it was prohibited to open and read somebody else's mail, somebody else's letters. He is recorded by Rashi and others as being an enormous scholarly figure in their lives. He was eclipsed later on because of their own scholarly writings, but through these enactments and through his transplantation of scholarly Jewish life from the East to Germany and to France eventually, he left a lasting mark on Jewish intellectual and wider history. Thanks for joining.